This episode is going to be different. Okay, I really did have a bad mountain biking accident and it changed my life in a drastic way. Now I'm all better now. I can use my left arm again. I've got a titanium plate on my clavicle right there. I've got a story to share that I will always remember. Now I typically film my videos in a variety of locations, so this one's all going to be filmed just right here, and I'm going to share my story. Are you ready? Now I'll tell you about the crash, but the exciting part comes next, okay? So I was going down one of my favorite trails, been down this trail at least 50 times. It's called Rush, probably going faster than I ever had before, coming around a big wide berm. And again, I was cruising along and I came across a rock. Okay, I saw a rock that I was heading right towards. I should have just gone over it, but instead I decided to turn my wheel up and kind of go around it. Well, my tire lost traction. When I did that, I slammed down, broke my clavicle, cracked a few ribs, knocked the wind out of me. Another mountain biker came along after me, and he helped walk my bike down to the car. It was about a mile walk. I figured out how to drive slowly home, and then my wife drove me to the hospital, to the emergency room, and found out that I did have a broken clavicle. And surgery was scheduled, so I could get that repaired because it was shifted quite a lot and there was another chunk of bone in there. Now I'm going to say something that is going to sound crazy, but I think you'll understand why soon, okay? I am so grateful that I broke my clavicle. I'm so grateful that I cracked my ribs. And I'm so grateful that my clavicle was broken in a way that I required surgery, that I had to have that titanium plate put in there, okay? So now let's dive into the story. I had the surgery, it went great, okay? The day after my surgery, in the evening, I got the hiccups. And I guess after you've had anesthesia, it's pretty common to get hiccups. Well, with cracked ribs and other injuries and bruises, my hiccups were extremely painful. Definitely prevented me from falling asleep. And it was also causing like acid reflux. So I was very uncomfortable. And I decided to pray. In my prayer, I said I knew that God could remove my hiccups. I asked if he'd be willing. The answer came, yes, I am willing. They have already stopped. I just heard that in my mind, and from that moment, there were no more hiccups, and I was able to fall asleep. A couple of hours later, I awoke. I needed to use the restroom, and while I was up, my hiccups returned. And the acid reflux was more irritating, and the pain medication was wearing off, and so I knew that prayer had worked a few hours previously. And I decided to pray again. The first answer was yes. So when I carefully knelt down next to my bed again this time, I prayed, but I got an answer, you have hiccups again to learn something. Admittedly, I questioned that, and when I prayed again, I was told, yes, I will stop your hiccups. Yet they didn't stop in that moment, and I sat pondering, and I expressed gratitude for removing my hiccups, a few hours previous. And then a thought came to my mind. I felt prompted to go and read a book of scripture called Alma 32. Now recently, I had been doubting my faith in a couple of areas. And I kind of had a mistaken thought that if I didn't believe or know something surely, then I didn't have strong faith. Well, as I read Alma 32, I was reminded that faith is a hope for things. And I am full of hope. Right? I hope for good, true things, and I needed that reminder. And then later on in that same passage, I read that faith is also expressing a desire to believe. So just desiring to believe something is faith. There are a lot of things that I desire to believe, and I reminded myself that that is also faith. So I had a good experience. I was hiccuping this whole time, and I journaled about what I had learned. I wrote it down. I felt the Spirit with me, and I again went to prayer. And I expressed gratitude. I again asked God for relief. I told God I was grateful for the hiccups because it led me to have this great experience in reading Alma 32. Kind of my questions were answered. Between the surges of pain and hiccuping, I focused on listening. And the answer came. I was told, I wanted you to experience listening during this challenge and learn from Alma 32. You followed my instructions. Now I will take them away. And they stopped. I pleasantly just waited for the next hiccup, and it didn't come. I said a prayer of thanks for the hiccups and the great learning experience, And then I asked for more instructions. I was prompted to go take another dose of my pain medication and return to my recliner to sleep. So I did that, and I felt the medicine gradually take away the pain pressure, and I returned to sleep for many hours. So the next morning, I awoke feeling very blessed. I pondered about these 2 experiences with prayer, and I journaled, and I wrote down the details and the prayer experiences. So later that day, I got the hiccups again, and they were painful, but I kind of smiled inside because I knew what to do, right? I waited for 10 minutes, and then I went and prayed. I was prompted, go read your journal entry to your kids. I got up, and I went and got my journal. I gathered my family in our living room. My wife, Christina, was there too. And while hiccuping, painfully hiccuping, I read the entry about my 2 experiences with hiccups in prayer. And during the very last sentence of my journal entry, I hiccuped one more time, but then I had a feeling like that was the last one. And so then I said to my family, now that I read this to you, I think my hiccups are gone. And they were. And my wife, I remember she shared that, that's pretty cool. So that was my 3rd experience. I prayed, and I was told to go do something and share my journal entry with my kids. And as soon as I did that, right that instant, the hiccups stopped. And then that night, my hiccups came back, I'll say with a vengeance, okay? I went to prayer. I was in great pain, and I was first prompted to go and pray with my 8-year-old son and have him pray for my hiccups. So I did that, and he said a sweet prayer. And then next I was prompted to do the same thing with my 12-year-old son. He said a very sweet prayer as well. And then I had the same prompting for my 14-year-old daughter. She was initially reluctant, but after some encouragement, she said a sweet prayer asking for my hiccups to go away. And my hiccups remained. I then went for a slow walk around our cul-de-sac. I learned that if I timed it right and I hiccuped when my lungs were full, the pain was reduced. After what seemed like a couple of hours, I was really worn down. I still felt grateful this whole time for the previous 3 times of my hiccups being removed. But at this point, I was getting drained. I really wanted to go to sleep. So I went back to my bedroom, and I knelt down one more time. I told God, I know you've heard my prayers. You've taken away my hiccups 3 times before, and I know you can do it again. Are you willing to take them away this time? And I got my answer. Yes, I am willing. And my hiccups stopped. I obviously felt so relieved. I felt really blessed. And that was the last time I had hiccups. So now, many months later, I have full use of my arms and my shoulders. I just feel so grateful that I had that bike crash and I was injured the way that I was, because if I had not crashed my bike, I wouldn't have snapped my clavicle and cracked 3 ribs. And without the snapped clavicle, I would not have needed surgery. Without the surgery, I wouldn't have needed the anesthesia. Without the anesthesia, I wouldn't have had the hiccups. And without the cracked ribs, my hiccups would not have been so painful. And without the pain, I would not have been brought to my knees in prayer, resulting in these miraculous experiences. I always want to remember what I've learned here. I've committed to pray like this every day, and I've been keeping a journal of all my prayer experiences. It's taken a lot of work. I study my scriptures daily, every day before I go to prayer. Every time I listen, every time I ask, I get profound and amazing and comforting answers and advice. I feel like I have a strengthened relationship with my Father in heaven, and that's the story of my mountain biking crash and why it was such a huge blessing. And I can say that it's changed my life forever, and that's really just my hope. I hope I never forget what I've learned. I hope that I can continue praying the same way the rest of my life, and I hope that this story might be helpful for you as well.